Look at this. I didn't realize this. Like, I take it for granted that a lot of guys just don't watch anime, which I was never a big fan. Like, I liked it. It was mostly from college. I had a friend who was like big into comics and manga and anime. Another friend who was really into movies. A third friend who was really into skateboarding. And they were all like aficionados for that thing. The other one was like Dungeons and Dragons tabletop stuff. And so I was like widely exposed to every nerd subculture at the time. For me, I was just like farming in trucks and drinking. So it was neat. But yeah, so the reason I'm doing this one, I don't do these podcasts very often, but when I do them, it's mostly stuff I enjoy. Like, it's much better than the other one, which I enjoy not being that guy. But this one, I love entertainment. Like, it's work hard, play hard. I'm sure you guys are like me, most of you anyway. I hope so. Where you work your ass off. Maybe you're in the trades. Maybe you're in an office job. Maybe you're a lawyer. You know, maybe you own your own business. Whatever. And you realize, like, when I'm done working, I like to enjoy good things, but things aren't good anymore. And I thought, since Ghost in the Shell is coming out on Sunday on the Orion channel, the preview for it, the trailer is out now. Wonderful. Why not go into a little bit about what makes this good? Because the one thing I have seen is that anytime somebody is cheerleading Japanimation, and I'm not going to call it anime if I can help it, I'm going to call it Japanimation because that's what they used to call it before anime. Anime is just a Japanese word for animation. Call it anime. So that's all it means. It doesn't mean anything fancy. But Japanimation, that sounded cooler. A little bit of history. Oh, wait, where's my notes? A little bit of history, but I'm not going to get autistic about it. Not like the people's names and not the 4 different types of anime. It's going to be a very normal person talk about it. And so you might find out that you've been missing out on stuff that you would probably enjoy. Started with Bambi. What? Yeah, there was like Japan animations in like the early 1900s, but they were kind of like meh. If you ever go see, like on YouTube, they'll have some of them and they're just like, what in the fuck? It looks like when you see those old Slavic animations in like the USSR, that's what Japan has. Like, America was just top of the world. Anyways. So the creator of anime as a style, he was watching Bambi and he saw all like the big bright eyes and the stuff like that. And he loved that style so much after the Second World War, decided to adopt it for himself. And that's when the first anime started coming out. I don't know much about the stuff coming out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but there's actually a revival movement of people that are like trying to find old versions of it because some of it is just lost forever. Some of it is so badly beat up. Like even the 80s too. Like, here, I'll give you an example. Fist of the North Star. It's a fairly popular anime. It's kind of like the Citizen Kane anime. Like, oh, everybody knows that one. There is, when I first watched it in the 80s, late 80s, I remember there was some scenes where guys were getting like exploded, blown up, because the idea is like you have like pressure points and the guy would hit it just right and your head would explode. And then the video always looked really weird. Like, we would know them today as VHS artifacts. And I thought that was just the style they used. It turns out that when they originally released it, they had to cut out all the extra violent parts to fit it onto TV. And nobody saved the originals. So the originals destroyed. So they had to go to like some Spanish laser disc and repiece it together. And that's why it has like the certain violent scenes have like this emphasis with the VHS artifacting, because they had to take literally a VHS tape from the Spanish dubs and put it on there. So it's pretty funny. But the first experience, this is one of those things I'll recommend for people. There's 2 movies. Vampire Hunter D came out in 1984, and Robot Carnival, which I think was 1986. Don't quote me on these dates. The reason I suggest them is because Robot Carnival is Japanese Fantasia. Do you remember Fantasia, the Disney one, where it was like just a musical thing, like an opera? No voices, no nothing. And Vampire Hunter D was the first one that kind of made it to North America. It was on TBS Nightflix. That's how old I'm thinking back. I don't know if anybody had a satellite dish or cable TV in the States back then. But TBS at like 3 in the morning used to have something they called Nightflix, where they'd show you all this weird, abstract, avant-garde stuff. And as a kid, I was fascinated by it. Yeah, a lot of stuff is badly damaged. And so, like, for no other reason, sometimes it's just nice to see things to know that there's a state of impermanence to it. Like, this might only exist in your memories. And God knows I have tons of examples of that. Anyways, so these things did rather well. And so they started bringing in kids' TV shows. Because in America, they noticed that adults considered cartoons children. That was it. Children, cartoons, same thing. And you ended up with Astro Boy, Ultraman, Robot Carnival. Ultimately, that's it. Astro Boy was the story about like a guy who built a robot to replace his dead kid and the adventures he had, kind of learning about growing up. Ultraman was like this giant, it was almost like Power Rangers if Power Rangers was a giant man fighting other big monsters, kind of like a Godzilla thing. And that kind of solidified in the American mind that anime was for children, because that was what they showed here, because at the time cartoons were for children, so that's all you would show. You wouldn't show a cartoon for adults. What the fuck is that? Turns out though, Japanimation is not for kids. It's just a style. It's no different than if you were to try to make a movie today and you have to make those decisions like, do I do what they did in The Lighthouse and film it on 4:3 scale and film it in black and white? Do I make the newest Marvel movie and use that asterisk camera? I think it's called Asterix. Anyways, there. Do I use that $100,000 camera and film it in widescreen 16:9? I'm filming the new Batman. Maybe I use the IMAX thing. Maybe I get these real actors. Maybe I'm Ralph Bakshi and I want to make a Lord of the Rings animated cartoon. I'll use rotoscoping. I'll make Fire and Ice. I'll take real actors, have them act the parts, draw over it, so that way I can make the animation look the way I want to look. That's all it is. It's just a creative decision. So when you want to make your movie, you're like, oh, do I use actors? Do I do it in black and white? Do I do it in color? Maybe I'll make it in animation style. So that's kind of like the first approach, is how to approach if you want to watch Japanimation. I always love it. It makes me feel like such a boomer when I'm calling it Japanimation. And all I can think about is that stupid Super Troopers thing. We're like, yeah, Chief, it's Afghanistanimation. Yeah, crazy how the films from the 70s and before look better on 4K than the newer stuff. Well, it's mostly because of the way film stock worked. A lot of it is we've associated the like peculiarities of film stock with movies. That's why they add film grade. If you ever watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or anything like that, every one of your shows on there has like a huge amount of film grain on it. Turns out that's better to hide. Like if you add that to a piece, you can hide a lot of the artifacts you can get from making a lossy format, because they have to make them very compressed so they can transmit across. Just throw film grain on it and it hides it. But it gives everything almost like a pseudo cinematic look to it. Same thing as you look at the old Kodak, was it Kodachrome, Panavision? You had to use like insanely hot and bright lights, but it gave everything a certain surrealist color to it. And this is the one reason I actually am making an episode to suggest to guys who maybe haven't watched Japanese animation you should, because I am sick and tired of this realism perpetrating movies and TV right now. There is a reason that good shows have a suspension of disbelief. Like, I'm sick and tired of, you see it on Twitter every single time where they were talking about The Walking Dead, and they had like 5 tomato plants. You can't grow enough tomatoes to feed a whole population off of that much farmland. That's stupid. And it's like, you're not meant to see 100% realism, because you know what you're going to do if you want to see realism? You'll go and watch real life. You'll go just plant tomato crops. The point of watching TV is to hear and listen and learn and resonate with stories. Good storytelling. That's all it's ever been. The technology is just a means to the end, and shitty storytelling that has a strong medium is what you would call content slop. Marvel spent $500 million on the greatest CGI ever to tell the worst story you could think of. You know what I mean? Oh, dude, you have a screening for it? That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I've never seen a screening for it. So that's the first thing. So you got like a little history from it. You see how it's kind of developed out. It actually did. It was basically Japan looked at Disney and it's like, we can make that better. And it's a style. It's a style. It's not a genre. It's not for a specific age demographic. There's actually terms that they use to describe. There's 4 different main categories of anime. And it's like shonen, jujitsu or something. I don't know. I'm not even gonna bother trying to pronounce. Oh, tashe wa moshinderu tani. I'm not gonna be that guy. The first one is, I think it's called, this one I actually remember. It's called Chibi or Chibi, whatever. And that's the one that you think of when you think of anime. They're like very neotenous. Kids with big heads, giant eyes, small bodies. It's very goofy, childlike. You know, like My Little Pony, Care Bears, that kind of thing. That stuff is developed for children. Now, and here's the funny part. There is an anime called Metropolis, which uses that style, but is absolutely adult themed. It's crazy. It's kind of a remake of the 1920 German existentialist film Metropolis. I don't know why people don't talk about it. The animation was just amazing. The story is really good. I actually have to go watch it again. I'm probably going to do an Orion video on it. But it does those same chibi art styles. So you can't even use this as a guide. Like, well, it's got the small kids with the big heads and the eyes, so it's definitely written for kids. It's like, not necessarily. And then the other ones, and then there's the Cowboy Bebop side, which is more realistic looking. The eyes are more normal. The heads and the bodies are more realistically shaped. And generally speaking, they talk about it for audiences. There's children, boy children, girl children, teenage boys, teenage girls. That's the 4 different categories, but they've kind of developed more into an art style, and it really depends on what you're watching. Now, the reason I like the older stuff is because they gave a lot more leeway to what kids should be exposed to back then. So you'll find, like, Astro Boy was dark. It was a Saturday morning kids cartoon. And I remember the dad ignored his kid because he wanted to work on his robots. And then the kid's like, I'm just going to go drive, get a hot dog at the stadium. He's like, yeah, go for it. And he's like, wait a minute. Kids can't drive robot cars. Next scene, kid's dead. Car accident. I was like, dude, you can't show this on TV. But as a kid, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. They didn't infantilize kids. And then the guy made the robot look like his dead son, which is kind of fucked up. And then he started yelling at him like he was his son too, and I was like, also kind of fucked up. That's why the older stuff works better. Anyways, what was I talking about here? Oh yeah, Metropolis. It's a really good one. I think it came out in like 2008. Hold up a second here. 2001. Oh yeah. Oh, and they counted as cyberpunk. Oh, that's awesome. Anyway, so it's kind of like the it's like Skynet. Skynet if it was set in the 1920s. So you get these ones, and they're interesting stories. And the thing that I like the most about them is they're different, because Japan is such, like, it's a very solid cultural. It's not like Canada. They have a very long history to them. They have their own cultural tropes. It's very different than the US and their cultural tropes, which are mostly based on the Brits and Western stuff and Germanic stuff and Anglo-Saxon. But it's not different, so different that it seems alien. Like, oh, I know this. I would have never thought to describe it this way, but I get it. And so that's the enjoyment of it. And then, yeah, just sitting there and you'd watch Vampire Hunter D. It's just like a vampire hunting thing. It was at the time, it's like Blade. Now it's pretty derivative, but at the time it was something new. Like, Blade didn't exist in 1984. Anyways, then it hit the golden age. I would say the golden age was probably 1993 to 2003 ish. Maybe spread it a couple years either way. There was just, because it was animation was expensive. And this is another thing you find out about anime, is that it was designed in the same way that rotoscoping was. It was to save money on production so you could make more content. That was it. They switched from the 30 to 60 frames a second that Disney was using because that was just too much animation, too many people. They switched it to like 12 frames. And so they had to develop creative techniques to get around that. And that's where, like, speed lines is the good example of that. When you see speed lines, everybody's like, really? They're not going to animate somebody flying through the air. They just put a bunch of lines in the background. Well, it turns out that is the suspension of disbelief that I keep saying that things need. In the same way you'll watch Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, and he has a fight, or Kickboxer with Van Damme, and he fights Hong Po at the end. And you know, at the end when you get the catharsis, like Van Damme cuts off his binds, He's unreleased, which was, by the way, I didn't put it in the video, but it's a great bit of storytelling. They take everybody who was take his brother who was kidnapped, they free him, and then he's like, all right, cut these bandages off his hands, and I was like, yeah, I'm free to fight him now my own way. He beats the shit out of him. But you'll look at it, it's always just set up, and it just stands there and gets wailed on, right? You're like, dude, in real life, he would lift his hands up and hold him on his head, or that punch would knock him out. It's like, that's not the point. The point isn't to show you a realistic fight between two Thai kickboxers in an underground dungeon. The point is catharsis. He's getting his comeuppance. The bad guy has done bad things all episode, and he's cheated and he's swindled, but now it's a fair fight, and now that it's a fair fight, the good guy is winning. And it's a very fantastical thing. Like, all of his amazing training has made him do all these amazing wowie things. That's not realistic. It's not supposed to be. It's theater. If you wanted realistic, go to realism. And then, yeah, then anime kind of did the same thing. And Speedlines is the perfect example of that. You wanted to show somebody moving very fast, Speedlines. And not only was it effective, it was cheap. Speedlines are easy. Just draw some lines. You could have an army of Korean animators in a dungeon somewhere, so whip them a couple times, they'll give you speed lines all day, which is how they technically did it. When you talk, like, if you ever look up, there's a bunch of documentaries about the making of Akira, and I would argue it's the same as when you watch, like, people talk about how they built the Brooklyn Bridge or the CN Tower or any of these big mega structures. Like, for every foot of height that this building had, 3 construction workers had to die. That's kind of how they talk about, like, making animation in Japan. But it's Korean, so they don't count. They're not real people, right? And that's also why a lot of the good animation's now coming out of Korea, because all of these people have been trained by Japanese people, and now they're like, hey, we have all of this resource, and our women aren't having babies anymore. Let's make some awesome Korean animation. The one in America, what do they call it? The black kid, Boondocks. Boondocks is technically anime, because they took the Korean studios and they sent them what they wanted, and they had to animate it and send it back. Yeah. Yeah, and see, it just gets to every cartoon with motorcycles tries the Akira slide. It's cliche. That's kind of why it gets shitty now, because at the time, the Akira slide, that was a big deal, but at the time, they were just doing it. The big deal for them when they were making it was how they integrated CGI in with Akira, which you don't even notice it, because all they did was they wireframed. They wireframed stuff, like mostly in motorcycle fights, you can tell, and then they would just paint over it. They would just use it to make the lines, the outline. But it's pretty cool stuff. Yeah. So from the early 90s to the early 2000s, and the big reason was the relationship between animation and CGI. And I think there's only one outlier here. It's this one James Bond-ish Japanese one called Golgo 13, where they technically had CGI in there, but it looked really blocky and crappy, and it takes you out of the moment. So it's not a very good example of it. And then Ghost in the Shell was the first example, but they created a reason in the story for it. So everybody had heads-up displays, and there was, like, computer screens. So the shitty CGI worked there because it was just meant to be that. Plus, they really made it simple. Really made it simple. And I noticed they also do this thing where it's the same as video games. Like, when you watch old PlayStation 1 stuff, it has a certain look to it, which is really cool, even though it's, like, low polygon counts. But it's because it's, like, 240p. Very small definitions. Everything has to be kind of exaggerated. It's hard to explain it without going into a whole video about the technical aspects of pixel ratios, and I'm not about to do that. But it just gives things its own stylistic look to it. But at the time, it was just technical limitations. And that's the problem now, is that those technical limitations have become a style of their own. People are making pastiches of it. A pastiche is like a fake, cheap knockoff. When you say Temu, like, oh, that's Temu anime, that's what they're saying. You're making a pastiche. So Ghost in the Shell came out in, I think, 95, and it was right in the midst of this. Like, at the time, there was... And this was before Cowboy Bebop. This was before Trigun. I think it was before pretty much everything. Akira was really the big one prior to this. And that's what brought everybody back in. And when I was watching it, the thing I noticed is it was really just a short story. It's not like Metropolis, which was like an amazing, like, full-fledged character study and a good film. It was just a short story. And the short story was just... It was Blade Runner-ish. You know, the one girl, she was basically heavily implanted, and she was almost not human. And as far as she was concerned, her brains and her spine were the only human parts left on her. But, like, I've never seen my own brain. Am I just a robot? Am I artificial intelligence? And everybody's like, no, artificial intelligence doesn't exist. They found this thing called the Puppet Master, ended up being artificial intelligence. And so the movie, while it makes it look like it's about hunting down this serial killer who's causing problems with the political climate, is actually just an existential, like when AI becomes more human than human, what makes us human? Interesting. It's actually got a lot of a very similar plot to in the character side of things as Theft of Fire by Devin Erickson. I really enjoy that. And the one thing they did that I didn't even notice they did is they used a lot of filler. The vibes are filler. Like they just want you to take a minute and take it all in and just breathe. So like they'll show you an action scene at the start where they assassinate a politician who's trying to steal a programmer out of the country. And then they'll stop right at the headshot. Boom, headshot, boom, explosion. Oh, it's cool, anime explosions. And then they stop right there just to give you 10 minutes of vibes of them building a cyborg body in a machine shop. Titles, stuff, really gives you like an amazing theme to it. And there's a confidence to it too, where they realize like, yeah, we don't have to fill every minute with this, with flashy lights and jangling keys. Just sit down. It's like sitting in a museum. Enjoy the painting. Enjoy the movie. Oh, it was great. And then they'll start it again. They give you a little bit of exposition. They lead up again to another set of action where they're trying to kill, or they're trying to capture these two criminals that are hacking into somebody's brain. Gets into a firefight and then a big chase scene, and then the chase just stops right in the middle. The guy's got like a moment to breathe. He looks up, a plane passes by in the sky. You're in the water over by the docks. It's pretty cool shit. And then bam, more action again. And they just keep peppering you with like 10 minutes of vibes, 5 minutes of action. Minutes of vibes, 5 minutes of action. At one point, the cyborg goes because she wants to feel human. She goes like diving, deep sea diving in the water. The guy's like, "You're diving in a body that could sink to the floor. What are you doing?" She goes, "Ah, I like danger." Even at the end, where the chick has to fight a tank to try and steal the body of the AI and just find out what the hell's going on, they just stop right in the middle of it, where the tank is just sitting there waiting and she's sitting there waiting, and it's just like this old Catholic temple. It's got some undertones there of like, you know, of what the soul means. They call them ghosts there, but it's really a soul, and it's just nice. Dragon Ball Z inspired me to hit the gym. Nice. But the thing I like about it is, so if you liked Blade Runner, but you notice Blade Runner may have been kind of slow for your tastes, the one thing I liked about the anime version of it, which is Ghost in the Shell, is since they're not restrained by the state of reality, they can have that same slow pacing, but it doesn't feel slow. It actually feels more aesthetic, which is great. I think it was awesome. And it resonated hard. Dude, that was the big thing. It took over a lot. Now, there was good stuff beforehand, like Macross Plus, another video I'm going to do on there, which, by the way, Walter White, buddy Cranston, was the voice of Isamu, the main guy in that one. That's always the one that throws me off when you watch that, and you're like, dude, why does that voice sound familiar? And you go look it up, you're like, holy shit, it's Malcolm in the Middle. Yeah, they had some big name actors back in the day. So it was pretty cool. And yeah, when you watch these, you get to watch things that are different, and the stories are good, and it's what would have been. And because CGI is so easy, you're just like, move the camera here, point this here, make this do this, make this do that. People kind of make sloppy stories. But with animation, you have to draw all the cells. That's a lot of work. So you plan it well before you even touch pen to paper. You have, I want it to be here. I want it to look this way. I want all the visuals to reinforce the narrative. Because you have the time to plan this out and plot it out. And by the time you start drawing, you can't make changes. You can't just say, can we move his arm a little over here? It's like, no, that's 10,000 hours of work. We cannot move his arm there. His arm is here, and that's the way it's going to be. So it's like, yeah, you better plan it better. It's almost like the reason Spielberg stuff took off and did so well. Same thing. Like if you ever watch a behind the scenes of like Indiana Jones or Back to the Future, and the reason that a lot of the studios liked him is because he was a meticulous planner too. He literally storyboarded every shot of his movie. So he could have just handed his movie over to somebody else to film and not even been there, and they would have filmed a Spielberg film. You would see it. The scene where, and then you'll see they on a lot of behind the scenes stuff, they juxtapose the screenshot of the film with a sketch that he drew of the scene. Like the scene in Indiana Jones 3 where he's fighting the Germans on the tank. The scene where he's caught on the little tank gun and he's getting run against the side. Like you look and it looks just like the screenshot. I want it to be underneath. I want this camera to movement this way, to move it that way, to move in, to move out. It's that planning, and that planning makes for much better movies, because that's the difference between good and bad storytelling, I find. And I would argue it's the way good storytelling separates from bad storytelling. It's that everything is moving in the same direction. There's no contrasting messages unless that's the intent. Like, the intent is always there. And it's one of those things, it's like shoveling your driveway. You never notice it unless somebody didn't do it. Same thing here. Good storytelling, you'll never notice what happens. You'll never see it. That's awesome. But it sucks in that if you're a business guy making movies, nobody sees this stuff. Nobody talks about it. It's intangible. And if it's done well, you never hear about it. So as far as you're concerned, it doesn't exist. So it's like, yeah, let's just make Guardians of the Galaxy level funny in, this DC movie. Let's make Batman, but he's giving goofy quips. And then you get a complete contradiction between the themes of Batman stuff, which tends to be dark, dismal, very crime, gritty, King of New York stuff. But then they're like, yeah, no, let's add some like millennial humor in there. And they're like, and people are like, this movie sucks. But they don't know why, because they're not filmmakers. They don't know the contradiction between the storytellings just takes them out of the moment. And when people say that, it takes you out of the moment. It's just our brain's ability to recognize patterns. So when everything in the movie is geared towards the same themes and aesthetics, your brain picks it up as it's all a pattern. And so it kind of lulls it. And that's why Ghost in the Shell does such a good job. It's just everything is hyper-focused in the same direction, so your body doesn't notice anything. It just kind of shuts off and takes it all in and absorbs it. But if you get something shitty that doesn't do that, then you're asking questions. What the hell's this? What's that? Why is this happening here? You know those questions your girl always asks you that drives you nuts? Same thing there. Yeah, exactly. Lego Batman was abomination. Oh, nuke. And that's the one advantage that anime has had over other films, in that the meticulous planning that had to happen beforehand, at least in the older days, because now with CGI, and now they're doing like cell animation where it's 3D rendering, but they flatten it to 2D when they put it to film. It makes it much easier and cheaper to make animation, which means ultimately the level of planning and storytelling that goes into things disappears. And that's why it kind of had like a brief period. So yeah, so I have like a small recommendation list I had for people here. There was Silver Age, which was Robot Carnival, Astro Boy, Ultraman, Vampire Hunter D, Fist of the North Star. Absolutely. I think those are like good. It's almost like watching a Nintendo game, like 8-bit, where it's so jank that it has a certain charm to it. And then there was the Golden Age, and that's where you've got, where did it go? Wicked City, Akira, Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, FLCL, Giant Robo, Metropolis, Grave of the Fireflies, anything from Studio Ghibli, actually. And I would argue Macross Plus. And I know there's going to be a bunch of people saying there's some other stuff in there too, but that's a lot. That's like 100 hours of content right there. Now, the one thing I will say about anime TV serial shows, like serialized episodes, like anybody who ever tried to get me into watching things, like I remember when my buddy tried to get me, he's like, you got to watch Trigun, it's awesome. But I just got to warn you right now, the first 8 episodes are shitty and slow. And it's like every single one has this, where there is a main plot that goes throughout all Japanese shows, but it usually starts later on. The first 8 to 10 episodes are always more like simple, funny, quirky stories, maybe some character development. And it almost feels like you have, like for your first watching, you almost have to slog through those to get to the main story, the stuff that you're really interested in. So I'll warn you right now, there's only one serialized anime that I can think of that's the exception to that, and that is Giant Robo, The Night the Earth Stood Still. That one is, but that one's only 6 episodes. They didn't have the time for that. The first episode is all of the setup, and it only has maybe 15-20 minutes of like the cheery, happy-go-lucky stuff. Everything is going well, and that's mostly to set up that like dark times are ahead, because then when they make the switch, pretty interesting. So that's why I don't generally recommend TV if people have never watched something before. I would probably go with the movie stuff. And I hate to say it, but Metropolis, like I really think that one would be a good starter film. I don't recommend it as a starter because not a lot of people know about it, but it's just, I don't know, it's just beautiful. It really is. And Robot Carnival, if you like Fantasia, you'll like Robot Carnival. Akira is just, it's Akira. I can't explain it. It's they do it well in the way that I aspire to write. Like they start it off and they give you they front load the good stuff. Like that first scene of the motorcycle fight between the clowns and Akira's and Kaneda's gang. Or yeah, Kaneda Tetsuo. Yeah. It lets you know the themes, the tones, it makes things interesting, it builds tension. It's just fucking it's a masterwork. There's a reason that it's called the Citizen Kane of animation, of Japanimation. Wicked City I like because it's like oh man, Wicked City is like a crime noir if it was Japanimation. It even has like the Blade Runner start, you know, with the voiceover. It's like, yeah, it's rough man in a rough town, and a set of legs walks in. That's this, that, and the other thing. You're like, cool. And then it shows you this. He picks up a chick in a bar, and then she turns into a weird spider monster and tries to bite and get a sample, which ends up being relevant later. But you kind of have this like, what the fuck was that? And I like that. I love when movies give you what the fuck. I love that shit. Like, how would you not want to watch something that surprises you at some point? You know what I mean? Give you something new, give you something interesting, make you think, make you curious. Why did they just do that? And then they make you wait an hour. And like, oh, that's why they made you do that. That's fucking cool. Yeah, Wicked City, extremely underrated. It's just awesome. And Men in Black ripped it off. What? Yeah. The Men in Black, yeah, I get the whole guys in black suits work for the CIA alien abduction. That's kind of a meme that's been around since like the 60s already. But Wicked City had like the cops that nobody can talk about, the hidden agency, and they pioneered, as far as I can tell, pioneered the idea of the gun with like crazy kickback. So that whole Will Smith joke about his little pistol that launches him back every time he fires it, yeah. That's Wicked City, man. 100%. And they team him up. So it's like got a bit of like a noir cop. It's also a buddy cop movie, but the chick is also a femme fatale. She's one of the demons, and they're trying to build up a peace treaty. It's pretty cool. Now, I probably don't watch it with your kids, at least at first. I don't know what your level of comfort is with watching things with your children. For me, I'm like, dude, at 8 years old with a satellite dish, I was watching all this shit. I don't give a fuck. You know, maybe you're like, yeah, I'd rather they not watch. They watch the girl's boobs melt. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough, Dad. But I think that's a good selection to start, and you might end up not an FLCL. That one's kind of more of like what's that one? The guy has to defeat the 7 girlfriend or the 7 ex-boyfriends. What the hell's that one? The one was the Michael Cera, where he has to beat up the 7 ex-boyfriends of the chick. Anyways, FLCL is kind of that. Whatever the name of that one was. I don't remember. Anyways, Grave of the Fireflies, I would say that's really one. It's a good, beautiful one, but it gets you out of your head of the idea, oh, this is a children's show, because you're watching Scott Pilgrim. Thank you. FLCL is like a messed up version of Scott Pilgrim. It's what Scott Pilgrim could have been if it was cool. And Grave of the Fireflies, it was like, I think it's the first of the Studio Ghibli films. Like Princess Mononoke and that. And those ones are just like beautiful aesthetic pieces of work. They're like up there with Akira, but they're kind of like Disney stuff. Yeah, thank you. I got her now. It was the story of the fire bombings of Japan. And it's 2 children who end up as orphans, slowly dying. So yeah, it's not a fun watch, but it's fucking compelling, man. Oh, you ever want to make a grown man cry? Have him watch this one. Total rug pull. Yeah, Studio Ghibli did that one. They did Princess Mononoke, which is Avatar, if Avatar was good. And what's the third one? Third one they did too about it. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland. All these ones. But anyways, it's a really good medium. And that's the problem, is that like nowadays, everything is kind of just selling toys to kids. They've kind of gotten into the 80s G.I. Joe phase of anime, where everything is Naruto and what's the other one? Like, it's gotten so... I don't mean this is a bad thing, because it's technically good. I've only ever watched one episode, and the problem is I'm so out of it. One Punch Man. One Punch Man is like a Mel Brooks satirical take on anime, on the general tropes and things of anime. Like the idea of taking somebody out with one punch, and that's why he's called One Punch Man, because he trained for like 3 months or something in a monastery. It takes the piss out of a lot of things. So unless you're a huge anime fan, you probably won't like One Punch Man, or you won't get a lot of the jokes. But if you are and you're kind of over it, then that might be the kind of thing for you. But that's the problem, is once you get to that kind of self-referential thing, it's kind of like it kind of shows you that you're past the hump, you're over the hill. So I don't know. Same thing with all the stuff coming out now. It's like magic and teenagers and dating, and I was like I know it's for kids, I get that, but yeah, there is still adult stuff. Scott Tabor, $20 super chat. Thank you very much, sir. Wicked City is good, but I have a sense of nostalgia for anime series like Yu Yu. Oh, Dragon Ball Z, Ball, but something about the art style of older movies just gets you. Evangeline, Full Metal Panic. Oh yeah, those ones too. Like try like Ramna 1/2 or Mad Bull, the Guyver. Yeah. Oh, so what he's talking about here absolutely is true. Is there's different styles, and you can kind of tell the decade something is made. So in the 80s, obviously there was no CG at all, so everything had to be hand drawn and hand painted, and that created limitations because of the difficulty and the time constraints they were under. And so there was just certain things that you couldn't do, and there's certain things you could do. And there was a lot of, like, the one thing I noticed is in the 80s is they love vivisecting people straight vertical. They would chop somebody in half vertically, and then he would pop out, and his eye would pop out, and the brain would pop out. It was like one of those, it's like the Wilhelm scream. It was always in a thing. And then they just stopped doing that one day. And then as CG made animation cheaper and easier to make, it gave them more freedom to do things. And with that extra freedom came more things you could do, but kind of less creativity. So, and that's what he's talking about when he's talking about the charm of the older style stuff, is that through that restriction, like restriction creates creativity. I've told this story multiple times, but I remember this when I was in my first painting class when I was a starving artist in college. And as an experiment, our teacher, who was also my art history teacher, he's just like, all right, make yourself, and he would teach us how to make canvases and this stuff. He's like, all right, now I want you to paint something. And you had like an hour to paint it. And for like the first hour, people were just staring at the things. They didn't know what to do. And it ended up being, everybody kind of made the same thing. Girls would paint horses, guys would paint cars. Somebody would paint a big eyeball. And he goes, all right. And then the next week, he actually gave us this thing. He's like, I want you to paint a landscape based on Northern European high Renaissance stuff. We're going to do it in oil painting. And if you're able, I want you to do rotted fruit. And now, when we had those constraints, everybody had like a way larger variety of art. And some of it looked really good. Some of it looked bad. There's like, quality depending on the person. But it was just funny how his whole point on this one took us 4 hours to learn this lesson. But yeah, it's just restriction breeds creativity. And so this is why I call the 90s to the 2000s the golden age, because that was like the butter zone where creative restriction and creative freedom, I think, hit their apex. And then after that, it just got too easy. There was too many things you could do. There's too many options. And I think creativity really took a dive on it. Although I don't know Yu Yu. I gotta look this one up. You guys, I swear to God, if you guys have got me looking up fucking hentai or something, I'll be so pissed off. Oh, okay. So it looks like a Dragon Ball Z kind of thing. Shonen fighting manga, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I get it. So it's like, yeah, like fantasy, Lord of the Rings, Japan type stuff. And that's the thing too. Like there's going to be, like, what I'm trying to do, I don't want to have nostalgia stuff here, because if I just do nostalgia, I'm just going to be able to tell you about my nostalgia. And everybody's going to have their own nostalgia. But if you haven't watched anything before, like if I show somebody Yu Yu as their first anime, it's probably going to turn them off. And so I don't think that's going to be a great pick. But give it a shot. You might like it. Too many options sounds like dating. Best tournament arc ever. I'll have to. That's the problem, is it's so weird. Maybe it's because I'm Canadian, or maybe it's just because I'm old. But like even old people, there seems to be like a separate siloed path of anime that I took that nobody else took. And the only thing I could blame it on is I'm going to put a link up in here. You guys can watch it if you want to. Don't watch it now, but There it is. Oh yeah, Wings of Oniyamas. I forgot all about that one. So there was a bunch of these. This isn't the right one I'm thinking of. The one I remember was, so it's this company called Manga Entertainment. And if you've never heard of it, oh my god. They were great. They were, oh, you know what? I know what it is. There she is. Yeah. This is the one. All right. This is where my path, like other than the TBS Netflix, this is where it truly got started. So this group called Manga Entertainment, they had like a movie of the month subscription service. You would subscribe to them, and every month they would send you a collection of the best anime, Japanimation coming in from Asia. And every single time they sent it in, they would send you this advertisement. This is the one I remember. It was KMFDM Ultra. Remember that song? KMFDM's Ultra? And they would show you Ninja Scroll, Fist of the North Star, the Guyver, Wings of Oniyamas, Macross Plus, Mad Bull, Eight Man After, Devilman, Giant Robo, yeah, Dangawa, The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb. That always threw me off. That was like a stop motion animation of a guy who was doing the Tom Thumb thing, but whatever. It always fit in there. Ghost in the Shell. And it would get you hyped, and you're like, holy shit, I gotta watch that. All right, King Rob 555. UU is godly. Must watch Chapter Black alone. All right, I tell you what. I will add it to my watch list. UU. Give it a go. If you had to compare it to something, what would you compare it to? Well, the only reason I didn't put the 80s in there, because the 80s had some, like, that's the best of the best. I would still argue Fist of the North Star, the movie, Akira, are probably the best examples of anime out of that time. But if you look at all the stuff coming out of there, it's hit or miss. It's just like Nintendo. The great Nintendo 8-bit games were awesome, but there was a lot of slop that you've completely forgotten about. The 90s, like the slop was even pretty good. And the 2000s, the slop was even pretty good. Yeah, subscription box for anime. The Prodigy soundtrack so recognizable, I'll bet. And I don't know if it's possible to get that back. Like, anime still hasn't made its own Netflix subscription service. Not really. Amazon Prime is pretty good about getting some stuff. I think Netflix bought Full Metal Alchemist, but. And then there's that, oh, what's the other one? Fun, whatever. But they had some drama in that they canceled a bunch of subscriptions and now nobody can watch anything that they paid money for, which is kind of annoying. Okay, so it's its own thing. A grounded Dragon Ball Z. Well, maybe I'll give it a watch then. So I don't know how to articulate. It's worth giving it a shot. I mean, it seems like most people here, Crunchyroll, thank you. It seems that most people here have like a familiarity with it already, but there really is some good stuff. And I think it's the fact that I was such a film snob growing up that it gave me a different, like, I didn't like things because they were anime. I liked things because they were good. But you also have to have like a stomach, like Ninja Scroll. Oh my god, they really nailed it on the introduction. Like, they will hook you right at the beginning of it. At the same time, they throw some shit in there. You're like, what the fuck? You're like, yep. It's not for the squeamish. If you're one of those guys that don't like gratuitous scenes for no reason other than they're horrific, yeah, maybe don't watch Ninja Scroll. Somebody like Batman would like it. Well, that'd be good. So I don't know. I have some ending thoughts on this one. It's just one of these days, once I get Orion big enough and bad enough and got the collection as far as I want it, I would probably do some more deep dives into like collections. And I really haven't put enough thought into, like, I know it sounds goofy, but the top 10 lists, but like proper, because that's really the theme for nowadays. There's too many options. There's too much choice. There's too many things. They're coming out with like a movie. Like, I remember in the 1900s, if you were rich, you had like 3 family photographs. And nowadays people have, like, every year more photos are being taken than in all of human history up to the year before. Like, it's exponentially growing. And everything is happening that way. Content, movies, films, Japanimation, it's all growing that fast. And back in the day, You didn't need to have curation because there was a Siskel and there was an Ebert, and they mostly told you what was good, and they were actually able to watch everything. Siskel and Ebert could actually have a job watching all the movies that came out that year and telling you what they thought of them. But you can't. Like, if I wanted to, I can't watch every anime that came out this year. I make that my 24/7 365 job. There's just too much. So this real skill in 2025 is curation. And because we have like a 50-year backlog of stuff that already exists that's already good, it makes more sense to let people front end the work. If something new is coming out, don't even bother watching it. Why? 90% of it is crap. You have a limited amount of time in your day, a limited amount of time to be entertained. Let a bunch of people watch the new Marvel slop, and if it's good, you'll find out. And let the early adopters do it. There is a catalog of movies, films, anime, and it's old, and they're all good. And for the most part, people have already done all of the legwork, so you don't need a huge aficionado taste maker cultivation to get there. Ask around. Siskel and Ebert, there's 500 Siskel and Eberts. You find one that resonates with the kind of thing you like, which I'm hoping it's me on this case, and you guys watch and subscribe to the channel. But maybe it's somebody else, and that's fine. And like, oh yeah, you'll love Ghost in the Shell. Oh, you'll love Akira. You'll love this. Oh, everybody says that. I want obscure stuff. It's like, do you want obscure stuff or do you want good stuff? Because like, you're not going to get both. There's some stuff that's good and obscure, but most obscure stuff is obscure because it sucks. Frankly, it just sucks. It's obscure because nobody wanted to watch it, nobody talked about it, and it just died on the vine. And it might be cool to have that hipster idea of like, I watch this piece of shit that nobody's ever heard of. Fuck off. Really? Remember when music was commissioned by nobles? Oh yeah, there's that too. I mean, everything was commissioned by nobles. I watched half an episode of One Piece. Like I said, it's the late 2000s. I really just fell off. Nothing really appealed to me after that. Although I've heard that one Attack on Titan is supposed to be pretty good. Is that the one where it has all the giants that try and break into the village? I might get there. Yeah, well, that's the other thing too, and that's the same reason I won't watch. What's that other one? The Luffy one, where he's the pirate. Like, I don't. 1,000 episodes is much, man. You're asking me for a lot of investment. I'm fine with like. I actually prefer movie format to televised serial formats. A self-contained story, 2 hours long. Like, I can live with that. That's a scope that I can live with. But the idea of just like a never-ending supply of like, even if, and there's no way you make 1,000 episodes of something and they're all good. There is guaranteed at least 50% of that is slop that's not worth watching unless you're already heavily invested into it. Guaranteed. Oh, sorry, I'm getting One Piece and One Punch Man mixed up then. Yeah. And is it Luffy or Lufty? I always get that mixed up. Good luck. It has 20 movies. Yeah. Yeah, for that, no. James Bond. I don't even watch all the James Bond. Same thing. It's like I liked Timothy Dalton. I kind of liked Pierce Brosnan's GoldenEye, and I like the new guy, but I'm like, his last one was kind of shit. So I'm like, I'm done with that too. Also, I'm be sitting here watching The Living Daylights and License to Kill till the end of my days. Much more condensed when they get it off the ground. Let you know if it's worth watching. Okay, so it is Luffy. That's good, or Luffy. That's good to know. But yeah, there's just so much good stuff there. And the episodes, I find the best serialized stuff is like 6 episodes, 7 episodes, 10 at the most. That's why I always recommend FLCL and Giant Robot. Or Giant Robo, because they're just small. They're small, they're digestible. And when you have a self-contained story, they're able to really polish it up. And I think it's one of those things. Even if you don't care about anime, you would watch it because they're good outside of it. If you like funny Ocean's 11 stuff, you Lupin the Third. Technically Lupin is like the original Americanized anime. I think he went through France with like the Howl's Moving Castle. Sec. Of course, they have a Netflix adapted one. Trying to get a list here of when the first ones came out. I want to say Oh, never mind. I was thinking the castle of Cagliostro. That's the one. It came out in like 1979. I remember that one. I didn't like it. Wasn't a Lupin fan, but I liked it. But yeah, so he's kind of like the James Bond Ocean 11 of anime too. There's that one. Yeah, they're making One Piece to hop. I have so much difficulty not multitasking while I'm watching stuff. And that's the other thing too. Like there's two things I enjoy. There's the things I enjoy as background, and there's the things I enjoy where I pay attention to. So like Ghost in the Shell, I like watching that. I don't like having it on in the background. Akira, I like watching it. I don't like having it on in the background. Most of the things I'll recommend to you is stuff that it's worth watching. Like even on this channel. When the old lady, I had her watch The Substitute with me again as I was watching. I had her watch Sniper with me again too. We watched it. We weren't on our phones while it was on in the background. And I'm finding that's kind of my only real criteria for films that or shows that I'm going to recommend in Orion is it worth putting your phone down to watch it? And it's like such a low bar. Such a low bar. But it works. Detective Conan 80 yards. Anyway, so that's it. I got for this one. We're on this. I know somebody is doing Rule Zero. I can't remember. So if you're watching this one and you have no idea what the hell a Rule Zero is, that is the other podcast that a network of my guys talk about. But I can't find it. All right, well, we'll just have to figure out our own way over there. And on that note, I need to get a introduction or an exit to this one. Actually, you know what? I'll end it off with the trailer for Ghost. The question is, do I have it here? I can figure it out. Sorry, Way of the Gun. We need to make room for Ghost in the Shell. There she is. All right, boys. Enjoy yourselves.
About fucking time it ran out.
Do you like anime? Do you like cyberpunk? Do you like vibes, Kino, or whatever the kids are calling it nowadays? Do you like a female cyborg that hits her full power level when she's nude for no reason other than it's awesome? Do you want to go back to a time when you watch cartoons, but you're a little too old for G.I. Joe? Well, wonder no more, because I have the movie for you. Japan has peaked with Akira and hasn't yet found its groove with teenage dramas and weird tentacle porn. The Japanimation empire has succeeded where Pearl Harbor could not, and achieved a total cultural victory. Some of the best people in the business, with just enough CGI for flavor and just enough of a great idea to put you in a Kino coma.
Just another unidentified corpse.
You will not find the corpse. My codename is Project 2501.
This movie is so great that it's the only anime that came close to dethroning Akira as the greatest animated film of all time. And they did it without requiring the blood sacrifice of 1,000 Korean animator souls. It's Japan's answer to the Emperor of Earth in Warhammer 40K. From the director who brought you most of the Japanimations that you dad grew up with, and single-purpose writers, they made this their life, their world. Ghost in the Shell is all they know, and it's effing awesome. The politics are corrupt and complex. The characters are brooding and augmented. The most humane are the least human. It's Blade Runner for weeaboos. It's Akira with robots. It's Max Headroom, but without Diet Pepsi. It's 5 years into the future. It's Ghost in the Shell, 1995.